Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SRHM podcast, which explores new research and emerging trends in the field of sexual and reproductive health and rights, with a focus on using rights-based knowledge for action. My name is Nina Sun, and I am an associate editor for the SRHM Journal. Welcome back to the SRHM podcast and Happy New Year. This is the first episode of 2025, and we look forward to kicking the new year off with you. Here's something to look forward to. Every Friday, we'll bring you thought-provoking discussions with leading experts in the field of sexual and reproductive health and rights, or SRHR. Together, we'll dive into the latest research, pressing current events, and the powerful movements shaping SRHR around the world. For today's episode, we're thrilled to welcome Emma Pitchforth, Executive Editor of the Sexual and Reproductive Health Matters Journal. Now, Emma, in your 2024 editorial, you anticipated a year full of dynamic and, at many times, challenging conversations in SRHR. You predicted continued explorations into the effects of broader social, economic, political, and technological shifts, as well as the resilience needed to sustain the SRHR movement during turbulent times. And in reality, what a year it turned out to be. So let's reflect. In 2024, we saw about half the world's population cast their vote in national and general elections. The political landscape shifted again, with President Trump inaugurated into the United States. Populist and right-wing governments continue to gain traction globally, bringing with them intensified anti-SRHR and anti-gender agendas. Meanwhile, ongoing conflicts and humanitarian crises, from Gaza to Sudan to Ukraine, continued to devastate communities and, unsurprisingly, had profound consequences on sexual and reproductive health and rights. Despite these challenges, the SRHM Journal made its mark with significant contributions. The 2024 open issue featured 14 compelling papers, alongside 2 curated collections spotlighting key themes: sexual pleasure and abortion rights. So with all these developments shaping the backdrop of your work, tell us, what stood out to you in terms of the papers that were published last year? Were there any moments or findings that felt particularly pivotal?
Thanks, Nina. When I think of 2024 for the journal, it's been very exciting. Having been in a place where we had to pause submissions in 2023 because of uncertainty in funding, we were delighted to reopen to submissions, and the number of submissions we are receiving has increased. I'll be interested to know what others feel, but I think 2024 for the journal was a year when the power of well-written commentaries and editorials came out in particular, and perhaps a feature of research articles having a slightly longer pipeline following reopening, though we've already seen in January a number of high-quality research articles go up this year. The first of these was a commentary by Katrina Karkazis and Michelle Krech, who wrote a really important commentary on oral contraceptives in the context of sex testing in sport, and highlighted whereas oral contraceptives in many contexts can be seen as a means to enhancing autonomy, the opposite is in fact true when women must submit to unwanted and medically unnecessary interventions in the field of sport. SRHM hasn't published a lot in this field, but we were really delighted to publish this commentary and look forward to doing more in the field in the future. I also really enjoyed the editorial by Anne Philpott and Paramita Vohra to accompany our special issue on sexual pleasure. It challenged us to think fundamentally about how we consider and position pleasure. The collection brought together a range of work across SRHM, but showed we can do much more, inviting people to be much more specific about pleasure, to be innovative in thinking about different types of knowledge, and to ensuring that lived experience is central. It more broadly reminds us again of the importance of thinking about well-being as well as sexual and reproductive health, and having a much broader definition. The third then was a commentary by Susanna Fried and colleagues, which looks at the use and misuse of evidence in contested rights-based on the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls report on prostitution and violence. It was a really careful and systematic critique, highlighting poor evidentiary practices with really important implications for the standing of UN mechanisms, but also how discussions and policies progress in an increasingly hostile context of anti-gender and anti-rights. We spoke about this when we spoke this time last year. We know that this commentary has been very important for the SRHR community too already, and we will continue to support the dissemination of the commentary. The final two are important editorials that have come from the broader SRHM team in 2024, one by Sapna Desai and Laura Ferguson on sexual and reproductive health and rights in Palestine, amplifying the gross violations of SRHR in conflict. While we all hold our breath around the current ceasefire, the editorial is challenging for SRHM in terms of us needing to publish more on conflict and also to think about the creation and assurance of safe spaces where people can publish with us, and we're working actively on this. Then the final one is the editorial led by Esther Kishmodi, taking stock of the evidence SRHM and Reproductive Health Matters journal before SRHM had published on abortion over the last 30 years. And it seems very timely with the inauguration of President Trump in the last couple of weeks to think about the global ramifications, but also ensure regional and local priorities are reflected in the continued publications we have about abortion. And we were looking forward to putting together a more specific call for 2025 around abortion.
Thanks so much for these insightful reflections. Now, while last year brought an impressive lineup of journal publications, SRHM also launched 2 exciting calls for papers, continuing the commitment to championing rights-based multidisciplinary work. For 2025, the SRHM Journal is currently calling for papers to the open issue, which, as always, invites submissions on a wide range of topics relating to sexual and reproductive health and rights. The issue remains a critical space for diverse methodologies, innovative approaches, and fresh perspectives across disciplines. In addition to the open issue, SRHM is also calling for papers specifically focused on 2 crucial areas. The first is sexual pleasure, which is a topic that's central to sexual health but is often underexplored in rights-based research. And the second is SRHR in war and armed conflict, which seeks evidence addressing the devastating impacts of war and armed conflict on sexual and reproductive health and rights. Also, following the success of last year's special collection on abortion rights, SRHM will soon be launching another call for papers on this essential topic in 2025. So, Emma, what are you hoping to see from these calls for papers? What kinds of evidence, stories, and perspectives are most needed right now to move the field forward?
Thanks, Nina. With sexual pleasure, I'm excited to think about the new diversity of types of evidence that we might see, and for sexual pleasure to become much more mainstream, as it were, in what we receive and cover in the journal. Sex is too often framed as just a risky behaviour in public health terms, and I think there is a really good set of questions on our call for papers that might provoke different ways of approaching research around sexual pleasure. For SRHR and war and armed conflict, we need to document the rights violations occurring and outline in the call that this might be through a range of forms of evidence. And crucially for us, it's thinking about how we can support those affected by conflict to be able to publish, to be able to have a voice. And we encourage anyone who's in this position to contact the editorial team. For all of the topics, I would really like to see increased involvement of those with lived experience, particularly in marginalised communities and frontline practitioners and advocates, not only as participants of research, but also in the prioritisation of research questions and in co-designing research. We would also like to emphasise the continued need to improve equity in research partnerships throughout the research process, and we will be updating our guidance this year to strengthen the expectations around authorship, needing to include authors based in the settings where research is taking place. And I just wanted to add to Watch This Space. As I mentioned, following our special collection on abortion, we're working with a range of partners to prioritise themes for a call of papers around abortion, and to say that we continue to welcome all papers in sexual and reproductive health and rights that have global relevance. We can be distraught about some of the decisions being made currently around SRHR, but it makes us all at SRHM all more determined to support authors in continuing to publish high-quality research and commentary to inform advocacy, policy and practice. And we welcome inquiries from authors or potential authors at any stage. So really say to people that please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you.
Emma, thank you so much for joining us today and for an insightful conversation. The work that you and the SRHM editorial team are doing is absolutely vital. By advancing the creation and sharing of credible, rights-based sexual and reproductive health knowledge, you're playing a critical role in transforming research into action and driving meaningful change in SRHR around the world. For our listeners, if you're interested in publishing with the SRHM Journal, check out the show notes for all the details. You'll find links to the journal page, author guidelines, fee and waiver information, as well as our current calls for papers. Despite the challenges facing SRHR globally, we remain hopeful and deeply committed to our shared vision, a world where sexual and reproductive health and rights are respected, protected, and fulfilled. A world where laws, policies, health systems, and practices are grounded in human rights, social justice, and the needs of all people without discrimination or violence. Thanks for tuning in to the first episode of 2025. Don't forget to subscribe and join us next Friday for another inspiring conversation. Until then, take care. Thanks for joining us for this insightful conversation. Please check the show notes for a link to the SRHM Journal, which is available online and open access. Follow us on social media and sign up for our newsletter to receive notifications for new publications. If you're enjoying this podcast, please subscribe, give us a rating, or leave a review. Sharing evidence-based and rights-grounded knowledge is our passion, and it's also critical to support the advocacy and actions that need to be taken to improve SRHR for all. We would very much appreciate it. Thank you for supporting the SRHM podcast, which is produced by our staff. The music was composed by Tiber Christian and Salomon Beautombe.